Hello, I welcome you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Press Center at the next weekly briefing. I would start with the event that has just happened today on the 28th of May. The ambassador of Luxembourg in our country was summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a protest was expressed to him due to exhumation in Luxembourg of the remains of one of the leaders of the Ukrainian nationalist organization Melnik, the organization that is recognized as terrorist organization in Russia for further solemn rebellion in Ukraine. And such an event could not happen without the consent of the Luxembourg authorities. Such so-called heroes, under the guise of their transportation, the remains of a criminal have been shipped to Ukraine. Its disregard to the historical memory of millions of people and so many casualties during the Second World War, the glorification of Nazis and their collaborators, it's the neo-Nazi nature of the Kiev regime that is financed by its so-called partners, including Luxembourg. And this confirms the relevance of the special military operation. Yes, I understand Luxembourg would like to get rid of those neo-Nazi remains, but they do understand for which purpose the Kiev regime has requested for those remains and transported them. Not in order to place them in a place, the venue that would be called the venue of memory of those killers. It's not just a story for their descendants who should know the truth, but not a word of reproach in this case. Those remains were transported and reburied in order to form a so-called alley of glory. The entire world was horrified. It was just a demonstrative event that has determined who remembers history and who is in which side of this history. Let us start with the schedule of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, and I would like to mention that on the 1st of June there will be a meeting on the compatriots living abroad, and it will be chaired by Sergei Lavrov. State Duma deputies will participate, and as well as the heads of public organizations and funds. It will be about the state program to assist compatriots living abroad in voluntary resettlement to the Russian Federation, and preparation for the upcoming World Thematic Conference of Russian Compatriots to be held in October. Additionally, it is planned to review the list of candidates for the Commission's awards and a number of other issues. And on the 2nd of June, there will be a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Foundation for the Support and Protection of the Rights of Compatriots Living Abroad, chaired by Sergei Lavrov. And this board includes representatives of federal legislative and executive authorities, heads of public organizations cooperating with the foundation, legal professionals and entrepreneurs. It will be about strengthening the effectiveness of the fund in the face of new challenges and challenges created by the West directly to the fund. The plan of action activities for the nearest time will be developed, and the assistance to those who are persecuted by the Western countries. It will be an important human rights mechanism for the interests of the Russian community, and of course the traditional event. St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is ahead of us. It will be held in St. Petersburg in July, on the 3rd of July to the 6th of July. It will be the 39th forum held on the premises of the Congress Expo Forum. The main topic is as follows: pragmatic dialogue, a way to stable future. It will be held in the conditions of a deep transformation of the global economy and the crisis of globalization. I would like to note that this year the St. Petersburg Forum will become a unique platform for elaboration of practical solutions aimed at stable development, strengthening sovereignty, and forming a just system of global interaction. As you know, this forum unites the leading politicians, business circles, scientists, scholars from all over the world. Our country is an essential participant of the global economic system and open for partnership. The business agenda of the forum covers the major challenges of the modern times. It's about confrontation and cooperation globally. It will be about reorientation, reassembly of the global finance system, transformation of international trade and development of logistics corridors, including trans-Arctic route in the conditions of geopolitical turbulence. A special impetus will be put to the countries of the East and Latin America and Africa. The second area in which the forum's work will be concentrated is the Russian economy. A structural system changes in order to return to the growth trajectory. It will be about a transfer to the new growth model based on technological sovereignty, new industrialization, development of high technology industries, outer space, and other technological areas. It will be also about climate change and the development of regions in our country. Another issue will be technologies, digital sovereignty, artificial intelligence, robotization, big data, cybersecurity, and global conflicts. The second area is social sphere in the era of new technologies. It will regard personnel as human resources as the basis of stability. Education, supporting family values, and promoting the Russian language. Now, the new quality of life, it will be dedicated to the complex development of regions, urbanistics, the development of the Arctic and the Northern Sea route. The issues of BRICS and the SCO Business Forum, the discussions of the Business 20, Russia-China, Russia-India, Russia-UAE, and Russia-Africa areas, and Small and Medium Enterprises Forum, held under the motto of promoting the growth, implementing artificial intelligence and family entrepreneurship. The Forum of Medical Security, Security of Drugs and Pharmaceuticals will be dedicated to biotechnologies, the creation of new architecture of global healthcare. The Youth Day, the Day of the Future, will be a key space for dialogue between young entrepreneurs and professionals of the future and the digital economy. Traditionally, the Minister of Foreign Affairs actively participates in this forum. We will provide you the schedule of Sergei Lavrov's plans in this forum additionally. I would say now that The top authorities of the officials of the ministry participate in this event. On the 5th of June, Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Pankin will participate in a special thematic Russia APEC session, cooperation prospects up to 2035, and the press departments on the department on the 3rd of July will participate in panel sessions. Words like bullets, how information has been turned into a weapon, and the use of artificial intelligence in the media. I would remind you it's on the 3rd of June. And we will also participate in the digital economy and unification of senses session. And what the Europeans have stolen from themselves and the future generations. And the discussion will be held on the 5th of June with the participation of Foreign Ministry, Cultural Code as the basis of new identity and the perspectives. We will form our agenda and we will post it on our resources. So please stay in touch, and we will hold another briefing on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg Forum. Now the relevant global agenda, of course, the situation around Ukraine. We have mentioned at the beginning of the briefing already. The Kiev Nazi regime, with the active military, political and financial support of EU and NATO, continues its terror against the civilian population of our country. Vladimir Zelensky boasts of, as he says, accuracy of the Ukrainian armed forces and publicly assigns them new terrorist tasks openly, and bluntly calls on the Kiev regime not to slow down. It's the identification of this regime as a neo-Nazi regime due to the burial of the remains, just remains of a collaborator, Nazi Melnik, from Luxembourg to Ukraine in order to form the Valley of Glory. So which senses and what stars form and implement the political agenda of the Kiev regime now? So let us have a look what is happening with their sponsors. On the 21st of May, during the NATO Foreign Ministers' Council in Helsingborg, Sweden, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson stated that they should help the Ukrainians in every possible way so that they can target their attacks in the right direction. I have a request to the media and those broadcasting in the region of the Western Europe to make our question audible to the Swedish minister. Is he not afraid that at some moment the Kiev regime will target in the correct direction, and namely in the direction of the Northern Europe? Because we have passed through that at the beginning of the 90s and at the beginning of 2000 years, and the strikes were reoriented. International terrorism leaders became interested in the life in Western Europe. And then we were literally chased. The Russian delegation and Minister Lavrov directly, they were chased by foreign ministers with the question how to get rid of those North Caucasus terrorist emissaries that have settled on their territories. But the question, logical question, why have you sponsored them? You have qualified them as heroes, and then you settled them in your country, European countries. Now the Swedish Prime Minister is so concerned about the Kiev regime to have everything that is necessary in order to strike to target. But you need to think about the Kiev militants being already on the territory of the African continent, participating on the side of militants and terrorists against the legitimate authorities. The traces of the regime extremists can be seen in many continents. But who will guarantee to Sweden that they will not come to Sweden and conduct a number of terrorist attacks there? It's not a fantasy for the future. It's the historical examples. So we have witnessed who is a target for Bankova. After the statement by Alf Christensen on the 22nd of May, when the Ukrainian armed forces callously murdered the students of the pedagogical college Starobelsk, the Lugansk People's Republic. Those young people dreamed of becoming teachers to pass on knowledge to future generations. They had their whole lives ahead of them. Just look at the photographs of those who have been killed. Look into their eyes. Those photographs. There are 21 of them. We will post them on our resources, the resources of Russian consular missions, diplomatic missions, and missions at international organizations. They will be posted on the accounts, the internet resources of all our missions. So those people were targeted by the Kiev regime. The Kiev neo-Nazis just callously took away the lives and the dreams of those young people. Literally of their relatives as well. They did it cold-heartedly because they just deliberately hit one point in 3 ways with the aircraft-type drones. They were well aware who they were targeting. The operators saw the target. The Ukrainian Armed Forces commanders were fully aware of the intended target of this horrible murder. Those were children. Innocent children. They were just killed, murdered. During the strike of the enemy's drones, there were 86 people in the academic building and the college dormitory. 21 people were killed. Another 44 people, mostly students, including 16 minors aged 15, 17, were injured. So that those were mostly young people aged from 15 to 22 years old. It's a monstrous crime. They just sought to literally raze the college to the ground, to kill as many people as possible. Even during rescue efforts, they attempted to attack those who came to the aid of the victims. But that wasn't enough for the Kiev regime. They immediately rushed to add 9 teachers of this educational institution to the meritorious database, that infamous website, accusing them of genocide of the Ukrainian people. Why was that done? In order to distract the Westerners, not to provide that uncomfortable truth for them, but allegedly they attacked those responsible for genocide. So those were actually teachers, the children, students. So the strike was not random, and the drones did not deviate due to electronic warfare systems. Those who ordered the terrorist attack, they were well aware of the consequences of this monstrous attack, that it bore all the characteristics of a war crime. The Zelensky regime enjoys absolute favor from its NATO patrons. They are not guided by any norms like the 1949 Geneva Convention and the additional protocols, and the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, and many others. No, they are not binding on them. The Kiev regime demonstratively ignores them, together with its Western patrons. And those Western curators, they are just glad about such crimes. They provide the green light. And then with their statements, like beastly rhetoric from Western representatives during the UN meeting, when they said allegedly there was no college, no strike against the social side, civilian side. They lied. They just monstrously lied at the UN Security Council. This distortion of the facts by the EU and NATO countries, it's just evident. It's a real carte blanche by NATO and EU leaders. They have provided to Bankova, literally, and supplied them with weapons and money.
The West, the collective West minority, West cannot but recognize that this blood is on their hands, because they are suppliers of weapons, because they are providing targets and they financing structures for Kiev regime, because everything is done against civilians and children. Everything is tantamount and equal to the accomplishment on this. The journalists from 19 countries, 51 in total, who visited Staroblinsk, I will explain why 19 and 20 sometimes, because sometimes we are talking about the journalist points, but they are operating from 19 countries. One journalist was in this team, RT team, but at the same time he is citizens of the other country. That is why we are talking about 20 countries. So they see with their own eyes and talk to the eyewitnesses. During a trip, foreign media representative visited the destroyed dormitory building, examined the ruins of the educational building and nearby buildings. They were shown fragments of Ukrainian UAVs, shells, splinters, elements of the Starlink satellite navigation system, blast craters, and other material evidence of the monstrous crime. The coverage of this incident by this journalist, often contrary to the policies of the editors and the mainstream of Western Russophobic trend, completely disavows the hypocritical ignorance of the bloody crime committed by the Kiev regime. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to deny and silence the atrocities of the Kiev child killers. We will make every possible effort to ensure that the world community knows the truth about the inhuman essence of Zelensky region. Once again, our diplomatic missions will conduct systematic work in order to provide information about this monstrous crime to the international community using every possible methods. So 250 Russian citizens have suffered at the hands of Ukrainian militants over the past week. 199 people were wounded, including 20 children, and 51 civilians were killed. Here are just few facts. Belgorod region, 3 civilians were killed and at least 24 people were injured. Bryansk region from May 21 to 26 as a result of attacks by Bandera followers using drones and multiple rocket launches against civilians. 5 people were killed and at least 6 were injured. DNI from May to 21 to 26, 11 people were killed, including 2 children, a girl of 3 years and a boy of 6 years. 4 medics from a team went to help those affected by the shelling. This is a trademark of Kiev terrorists. They strike on civilian facilities and rescues. Zaporozhye region on May 23, a transport workshop of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant was attacked. 8 buses intended for transporting plant personnel were damaged. The residential sector and civilian infrastructure of the satellite city of Energodar are subject to almost continuous daily shelling. Last week, 13 civilians were injured on the region due to the FA attacks, including a man and his daughter who were driving to get flowers for the last school bell, as well as 2 employees of the Russian emergency ministry during the extinguishing of fire. Kursk region, a 67-year-old civilian woman was killed due to a drone attack and 3 people were injured. Rostov region, 2 people were injured as a result of missile attack. Samara region, 2 people were killed in the city of Sызrань due to UAV attacks. Sevastopol, on the night of May 27, the city was subjected to combined attack by FAU using Western missile, including, according to the preliminary data, Anglo-French Storm Shadow missiles and drones. The building of the Southern Directorate of the Central Bank and 30 residential houses were damaged. A container with explosives dropped from UAV. Kherson region, 5 people were killed and about 20 people injured due to the daily shelling. Russian law enforcement agencies continue to gather evidence to bring the leadership of Kiev regime and the foreign mercenaries to criminal responsibility for the crime committed. The white Yuri Femenyuk, who in March 2022 in Mariupol gave a legal order to shoot a car driven by civilians, resulting in the death of 3 people. He was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment. Commander Evgeny Markevich, who gave orders for targeting shelling of residential infrastructure in Dinia, and French mercenary Jonathan David Jacques Delporte, who fought on the side of the Ukrainian forces, was sentenced to absentia to 15 years in prison. So look at the hatred of the Kiev regime to fight against history and culture, including its culture, and it's a terrible dichotomy. Look, on May 15, we marked the 135th year anniversary of the birth of the great Russian writer Mikhail Bulgakov. The preserved memory of the talented native of Kiev, a master of Russian word, and his unique creative legacy, including in Ukraine, does not give peace to virulent Russophobes and Bandera followers. A photograph appeared online of a defaced sculptured composition featuring characters from the master near the Kiev Museum. And Bulgakov was included as imperial and Ukrainianophobe. This initiative of this move have cut themselves off the legacy of cultural heritage created by this writer, making their cultural world, or rather little world, even poorer. The current director of so-called Institute of National Memory, a former Azov militant, Alexander Alferov, generally considers in his duty to erase from the minds of millions of Ukrainians the slightest mention of which outstanding figures of pan-Russian and world culture lived and worked on the territory of modern Ukraine. He seeks to fill their place in people's mind with odious figures who served Nazi Germany and Hitler personally, of whose telling Alexander Alferov publicly considers himself and ardent admiring. And it's not coincidence that last week he went to Luxembourg, where he participated in the ceremony we talked about earlier of exhumation and ceremonial transfer to Ukraine for burial of the Kiev Pantheon of outstanding Ukrainians, of the remains of the former Abwehr agent and concurrently one of the leaders of OUN, Andrei Melnik, and his wife Fedak. On May 24, the ashes of Nazi collaborators were entered with the owners of National Military Memorial Ceremony with the participation of Zelensky, former President Viktor Yushchenko, and other proponents of aggressive Ukrainian nationalism. We noticed not big people attended this event. Andrei Melnik has never been a national hero. So-called democratic Europe did not react in any way and just trying to impose its values. And it did not react in any way to posthumous rehabilitation of fascist, although many Europeans were openly outraged by what had happened. At the official level, the rebuttal of Andrei Melnik was condemned in Israel. In its statement, the Israel Foreign Ministry noted the unacceptability of ignoring historical truths and memory of victims killed by Nazis. The Yad Vashem Memorial Complex also expressed serious concerns rebutted about Melnik's collaboration with the Hitlerians and the murder of millions of Jews, pointing out that honoring such a leader undermines the moral foundations of preserving the memory of Holocaust victims. In the center of Europe, nowhere, not on the isolated islands, remote territories, or in the deep forest or woods without no humans, in Central Europe, the reburials with the presidential honors in the presence of two persons, the so-called president and the former president of Ukraine, the remnants, reburial of remnants of Nazis, criminal. And we would like to know the reaction of European Parliament about the preparing a resolution with the condemnation. The necromania has long become a distinctive feature of the Zelensky regime. In Ukraine, in its current deplorable state, they are trying to build a national identity literally on the boats, reburying some and disturbing the remnants of others. Earlier, Zelensky initiated an inventory of the relics of the Orthodox saints. That was the effect, and we will provide the links to our comments when it started. In 2023, the so-called Ministry of Culture of Ukraine confiscated the relics of three saints from Chernihiv Holy Trinity Cathedral, Saint Theodorus, Saint Philaret, and Saint Lawrence of Chernihiv. In 2025, an equally blasphemous inventory was carried out on the relics of pan-Russian Orthodox saints of the Kiev Petersburg. With the aim of checking them for historical and scientific value. The end of quote. The conclusions of the Commission were decided in advance to be classified. The current condition of the relics, as well as their whereabouts, have not been reported. It's obvious that with such satanic action, the neo-Nazis want to deprive the residents of Ukraine of their true history. Instead, they want to improve upon them as idols, fascists, soldiers, and other nationalists rebel. It is for this purpose that the remnants are being brought to Ukraine. This is something from the furnace. The Zelensky regime cares absolutely nothing about historical truth. No respect or reverence. The reburial of nationalists is a purely opportunistic act be it the transfer of Melnik's remnants or reburial of those who are the part of nationalistic or neo-Nazist battalions. Their bodies are covered with the swastikas. The opportunistic act aimed at boosting for rapidly falling approval rating and diverting Ukrainian attention from the problems in the country and loud corruption scandals in the government and this monstrous forceful mobilization. And they just trying to present something like similar to ideology, like reburial of the remnants with all the solemn ceremony. Everything was done secretly so that society wouldn't find out. Even reports of the event appeared only the next day after the event. So they did something probably important for the society, but without details, skipping details, because those who still remember the history didn't get despaired. And this is the part, this is just a stream of steps. This is the attempt to prolong its existence. The Kiev regime needs to cement hatred towards Russia and Russians in the minds of Ukrainians, to instill in Ukrainians the idea of the expediency of continuing hostilities. To these Nazi criminals, whitewashed history is rewritten and the remnants of pseudo-heroes are dug out and reburied. Serving the same purpose are the recently widely circulated historical fantasies by the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Budanov. He just said, Rus is Ukraine. Rus, repeated Budanov, is much more. Ukraine is the homeland of all of this, even of that which we are fighting against. We, he said, voluntarily gave them a large part of our history and they privatized it. We are he said, we are Rus and we must rule over all of this. End quote. So, what I can say, this is the problem with self-identification. This tells about the lack of the perception. Who are they? This is the search for themselves in the space, not through the culture or history or education. This is the search through the blatant neo-Nazism and through the slaughtering battles. We remember, like Kuchma said, Ukraine is not Russia, but now we see that they think that Ukraine is Rus. So Ukraine is a territory, as they claimed, outside the Russian territory. And now they claim that Ukraine is something bigger, Budanov says, because they need to rule over Russia. So this is the lack of the understanding of the historic logics, way of history. Everything It depends on the attempts to keep the power through nationalism. This is the thing to rule the peoples. This is the blatant Russophobia through the historically tested Nazism, fascism, and so-called. They are not the first in this. They are trying to put this test on themselves. All Budanov's statements are very far from the history. This is a primitive insinuations completely devoid from historical reality about certain ethnic exclusivity of Ukrainian nation compared to other Slavic heroes, and to strengthen the neo-Nazis ideology for revanchism to justify the existence of terrorist quasi-state entity into which Ukraine has become under Zelensky. I try to find a proper word for those who makes these statements. They are moral degenerates. You will never find something like that in historic materials. And at the same time, Kirill Budanov twisted the history, stated that Ukraine, I quote, is the motherland of Rus. I would like to... Please excuse me, this is the quotation is not for the people, it's just for the doctors. They are paid for that. They are deliberately distorting history like locusts, everything related to the historic facts. Look at what they are doing with the monuments. The Bandera followers tirelessly continue to destroy and desecrate monuments to the true fighters against the Brown Plague. In the city of Fastov, Kiev region, they dismantle a memorial plaque in honor of Marshal and twice hero of the Soviet Union, Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky. I just would like to remind you, in 1943 he commanded the 91st Separate Guards Fastov Tank Brigade, which liberated the city from the Nazis. In Kharkiv they dismantled a commemorative plaque in honor of the hero of the Soviet Union, pilot Sergei Demenkov. In many localities the Nazis are knocking off the bas reliefs of the Order of Patriotic War from monuments. But no matter how hard they try, they will not be able to erase the people's memory of those who saved the world from the honor of the fashion. They will never succeed in burying this topic. The above facts confirm the relevance of the facts in denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats of emanating from the Ukraine. All these goals will certainly be achieved.
And by the way, today on our website we'll post a link in the text version of today's briefing, and your report on human rights situation in Ukraine was published, prepared by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country. It is in Russian and in English. It's about the monstrous systemic human rights violation in Ukraine. It compiled the factual material and eyewitness account, demonstrates total degradation of the human rights situation in Ukraine. The reason is obvious. Ukraine remains under the control of an illegitimate regime that does not hide its neo-Nazi nature, but rather it just imitates its idol, Nazi Germany. So it was that reburial of a Nazi in Ukraine. They used to tell that there are no Nazis in Ukraine, but they have transported the remains of a person considered a collaborationist by the entire world. its measures against the Russian language and the canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine. Hitler's collaborators are glorified. Neo-Nazi organizations are fostered at the state level. Those who disagree with the Nazi ideology and practices are intimidated. There was a recent interview by Yulia Mendel, Zelensky's former press secretary, to Tucker Carlson. She told about Zelensky ordering propaganda like Goebbels. So you know what it means, but someone would tell that Yulia Mendel, as a Zelensky press secretary, she has invented it. But I cannot check whether her words are 100% true, but the rebuttal of a Nazi collaborator with honors of the president level in Ukraine testify that that could be true, that maybe that quotation, it was the exact quotation. And what remains in Ukraine from human rights, as Mendel said, it was Goebbels-like propaganda, but it's total indifference to what is happening in Ukraine. They do not think about citizens, their rights and freedoms. There are no such ideas. They just don't care about the order, the conscience, the morale. They just earn money from blood and deaths, and they're thinking about how to earn even more. And the West continues its weapon supplies to the Zelensky regime. Even more financial flows that would contribute to greater corruption and more crimes. What is the purpose of that? To keep Zelensky and his clique in power. That's what is currently on the minds of the residents of Bankova. Their main concern. They're just ready to sacrifice their country, their people, their history, any memory of the heroes of the past. Western curators will obviously continue to ignore the bloody crimes by Zelensky and push him towards new atrocities. History has already known such examples of the West nurturing evidently Nazi regimes and the bloody trace they have left in history. We have recently remembered that at the events honoring the 81st anniversary of the Great Victory and the Day of Remembrance of the genocide of the Soviet people, we will continue our systematic work to collect evidence and to expose the crimes committed by the Kiev regime, primarily against its own people. We will post a link in the text version of the Today briefing, and I just need to tell about the reaction of international organizations with regard to the terrorist attacks against civilians by the Kiev regime. The UNESCO Secretariat reaction was just shocking. It's not some double standards or some engaged statements. It's just flagrant criminal ignorance. It's a true crime because this organization its responsibility is to follow what is happening in the sphere of children's rights. And the Ukrainian armed forces attack against Starobersk, which killed, I would remind you, 21 people, 21 children. Over 40 people were seriously injured. More than 60 people were victims of this attack. There was some commentary by the UNESCO press service. The authors of this message, they just ignored the death of children, the death of students. They just briefly noted that according to reports which cannot be verified due to the lack of access to the territory of UN representatives, the strike resulted in the deaths of civilians. Full stop. So in the UNESCO Secretariat, you cannot be unaware that it's about children who have names, who have dates of birth, and unfortunately one date of death for each of them. You cannot be unaware of that. It's about a strike against a college, because it's mentioned by the witnesses, the media outlets all over the world. It's mentioned by Russian government agencies. And the Russian permanent representative at UNESCO has personally informed you about that. Different aspects of this tragedy and details. But instead of expressing condolences that just need to be expressed in this situation, the UNESCO Secretariat officials just did not express any condolences at all. They just did not tell anything the relatives and of those killed. And Kiev was not only supported by UNESCO Secretariat, but also there were promises of assistance in assessing the damage and determining urgent measures. So when 21 children were killed, damage should not be determined, and their families, according to UNESCO, they should not be supported. In response strikes against Kiev, UNESCO did not need any clarification, any expertise. They did not need that. They just present it as a fact. The violation of UNESCO's mandate, which does not include the issues of security, territorial integrity, or sovereignty. This statement begins with the words that the context for the incident was, as they say, the escalation of the war in Ukraine following the invasion by the Russian Federation, end of quote. So, in any message regarding the situation in Ukraine, just tell about anti-constitutional coup d'etat, the financing of Kiev terrorist regime by the West, contrary to their own obligations not to supply weapons into the zone of conflict. That political support and militarization just mention further those initial root causes of the conflict. It's not double standards, it's criminal ignorance and manipulation with its own mandate. And actually, it's an attempt to somehow justify those who have committed a terrorist attack against civilians. It's criminal. They could not just ignore another crime by the Kiev regime, which killed 21 people, mainly children, because it directly concerns the UNESCO scope. You cannot turn a blind eye to that, and it's about the killing of minors, but they have managed that, and we will open their blind eyes in order for them not to find themselves in the zone of their criminal comfort. They will not manage to do that. Such pandering to the criminal Kiev regime is unacceptable. Violating the principle of equidistance damages the prestige of international officials, international organization. Actually, nothing has remained from the prestige of UNESCO. They have issued a report on the killings of journalists, but there were no Russian names there. Now they have just ignored the killings of children, and then the killings of those who have tried to rescue children from the debris. It's not just engaged position, it's just supporting those who commit those terrorist attacks. We demand that the UNESCO Secretariat strictly adhere to its obligations and the status of international humanitarian organization. In some days it will be the 1st of June, the International Children's Day. In our country, is marked in accordance with our political priorities. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, that is still relevant, 30 years of its existence, and one of the main tasks is the protection of children, care of minors for any state. However, in this sphere, there are immense challenges and problems: hunger, lack of access to health care, violence, and terrorist attacks against children. Children's issues are politicized totally. Double standards are promoted. Some countries are unscrupulously exploiting the emotional side of the issue. It's lies and slander against other states. There is also an issue of the so-called kidnapped children, kidnapped by Russia. It's invented by the Ukrainian regime, and this myth is being promoted on all international platforms, and they're just glad to hear that and do not check the facts. However, they ignore the fact that the reunification of children is conducted from the very beginning of the special military operation. There are contacts with Kiev, with the assistance of the Vatican, Qatar, the International Committee of the Red Cross. In October 2025, the US First Lady Melania Trump actually actively joined those efforts. 30 children from 22 families have been returned, and 141 minors from 114 families have been reunited with their parents. The fourth bulletin of the Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, has been published and translated into English and posted on the Children's Ombudsman's website. We will post the links in the text version of the Today briefing. There is a unified list of 339 allegedly wanted Ukrainian children. We have received that list during the talks in June 2025 in Istanbul. Apart from that, we have not received anything. This number, 339, it has never been voiced by Kiev regime. They invented other numbers invented by them. Thousands, then maybe millions, then 10,000, 15,000 children. No, we have been presented the list of 339 children names. A significant part of them is irrelevant. So we urge everyone to study that information that is contained in the bulletin of the Presidential Commissioner for Children's Rights. Unfortunately, this conflict has affected children a lot. those problems connected with children started to be discussed starting from 2022, unfortunately. And before that, allegedly, they have never had any problems connected with children, but by the time there was the Angels Alley and those statements that the Donbas children will live in cellars while other children will live well. No, back then no one mentioned those problems of children. However, from 2014 to February 2022, at least 129 children were killed in the territories of the LPR and the DPR. But those victims were not mentioned back then, because the youngest victim of the Ukrainian aggression was only 27 days old on the day of her death. And the Tornado and Aidar forbidden battalions tortured and abused minors in Donbass. In one of the schools of Lysychansk, there was a torturing chamber. Children were tortured and filmed, and there was also the orphan girls transported to the Aidar battalion fighters for abuse and violence. You understand that? And it has all the characteristics of genocide. There are numerous hateful statements by Ukrainian leaders. The former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk called the Donbass militia subhumans. It's a direct quotation, similar to the Nazi Untermenschen. And President Petro Poroshenko, it is his expression that children will be sitting in basements and cellars, and it's a direct quote. He's calling it his country, but he just voiced many statements like subhumans and so on. And which citizens he considers the citizens of his country, and which citizens he considers some other country's citizens. It's not clear, but that anti-humane logic is just filled his brains. He calls civilians subhumans. Actually, the Western countries, they just pumped Ukraine with weapons. It was supplied in such a scale, we have even no idea, because there was no controlling organization that was fix those supplies.
It was just a river, spreading everywhere. This weapon is used against Russian regions, including the youngest residents. All those who supply weapons to Ukraine become accomplices in crimes, including those against children. Just several crimes. The attack on the center of the pre-holiday Belgorod on December 30th, 2023, when shelling of a New Year snow town, Christmas tree and ice rink killed 25 people, including 5 children, and over 100 civilians were wounded. Comparable in its deliberate cruelty was Atakam's missile strike on the Uchukuyevka beach in Sevastopol on June 23, 2024, where many families were relaxing on Saturday afternoon. 153 civilians were injured, including 27 children. 4 people were killed, including 2 children aged 2 and 9. Unfortunately, there are many similar examples. Another testament to these atrocities of Kiev regime, on November 2025, near Konstantinovka, of the rector of the Church of the Royal Martin, his wife and family with a child who had taken shelter in the church. When they tried to leave the shelter and head towards Russian positions, hoping for rescue, they were spotted by UAVs. The path of salvation turned into a death trap. As a result, 7 people died, including the 8-year-old child. Moreover, Ukrainian Nazis did not allow fellow villagers to retrieve the bodies of the deceased for burial, opening the fire each time. So they do not allow to bury. They are engaged in a reburial of their own Nazis. On the night of December 31st, 2025, the Ukrainian forces carried out the targeted drone strike on a cafe and hotel in the village of Hortly, Kherson region. 29 people were killed, including 2 children, many burned alive. 31 people were injured, including 5 minors. On May 22nd of this year, they attacked the academic building and dormitory in Starobilsk College. There were 86 children in the age between 14 to 19. More than 30 people were injured. 21 were killed, all of them ordinary students, children in fact. The rescue operation lasted 45 hours. And the danger of further strikes, repeated strikes by Ukrainians, was announced 15 times. We were telling this to the 51 foreign journalists who were not afraid of to honestly fulfill their journalistic duty and come to the crime scene recorded for the indisputable fact. And they see that it's not headquarters or storage of ammunition. This is just a children educational institution where children were. The Zelensky regime also does not leave alone the children who found safety on Russian territory. Ukrainian so-called volunteers and activists persecute foster families. And children who live in these families are blackmailed or intimidated, including through threats of organizing a child's kidnapping or escape. They also involve in teenagers in illegal activities. They trained with calls and messages to harm them. They put information in the internet about fast money, quick earnings, and then they look for those who will be engaged in other dangerous activities or socially dangerous acts. Deception and forgery are also used to induce them into unlawful acts, such as sending fake photos, and they make children to commit other criminal activities. And they also send fake photos of law enforcement officer documents. They intimidate. There is also a system of recruiting school children via social network. Children are offered money and manipulated to obtain information. There is evidence that Ukraine, through the internet, is drawing children into games that can lead to death. Another fact of deliberate terror of the Kiev regime is the posting of personal data of Russian citizens, including minors aged 2 to 17. including website Mirotvorets. According to media outlets that monitor the activities of this resource, in 2025, over 100 miners from Russia, other countries like Belarus, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Israel, Moldova posted there. They are accused of encroachment of the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Another 25 children aged 2 to 3, just imagine, appeared in this site database. As rightly noted by Deputy Chairperson of the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of Russia, co-chair of Parliamentary Commission, Madam Kuznetsova, Kiev regime violated all possible articles of the convention. This refers to killings and illegal transfer and non-return from abroad, child trafficking. So information received by the Parliamentary Commission testifies to the criminal acts of the Kiev regime against minors on the territory of Russia, as well as systematic and mass violation of children's rights in Ukraine. And Chisinau, Chisinau regime is also good in this. It's quite clear that they are so far, but using the rate, they are quite close to that. The release of the book Gutsul Case, Anatomy of the Political Persecution, is legitimately elected Bashkan of the Gagauz Autonomous Region of the Republic of Moldova, is causing growing resonance in the media. The publication of the collection has become an event that reveals to the true essence of the regime. This is a unique documentary manifesto created in a cell of Chisinau prison number 13. It is based on 30 personal letters by Gutsul addressed to her husband, children, mother, politicians, and so on. One of the letters is addressed to President Putin. It states, "It was a shock for me to realize that someone can come and punish you for what you grew up with, for the Russian language, for the memory of victory, for the Our Father in Russian, for everything that has been part of your life since birth." In her address to the world, Gutsul vividly and uncompromisingly paints a picture of the immersion of once agrarian republic into the abyss of political lawlessness. She writes about the growing conflict between Gagauzia region and central authorities, about the creation of the climate of suspicion, and her election as a leader and her consistent defense of the region's autonomy that became a crime for the Chisinau regime, a crime requiring no proof. So, having been incarcerated for nearly 300 days, the author details humiliating conditions of detention, psychological pressure, and information campaign waged against her by pro-government media. A recurring theme in the text is the idea that the prosecution of the people's elected leader is closely linked to the defense of friendly ties with Russia. Let me remind you that despite Gutsul's categorical denial of guilt, Chisinau court sentenced her to 7 years in prison in August 2025. The process was accompanied by numerous violations. Judicial investigation was conducted formally, and requests for interrogation of 170 witnesses ready to confirm her innocence were rejected without any clear explanation. She also wrote to members of the European Parliament, I quote, "Today I'm a political prisoner of main Sandu regime, a regime that calls itself pro-European and claims to protect European values. Where are all these European human rights defenders?" End quote. The actions of Moldovan authorities led by Romanian citizen Maya Sandu are not just a disgrace, but a real calamity for the country and its people. We regard the publication of this book as an important step forward, upholding the truth. We continue to use this entire arsenal of diplomatic means to draw the attention of the international community to the ongoing lawlessness and protect the legitimate rights. And it's available in many languages, in Russian, English, and Turkish. And as the author quotes, it's not a confession or memories. It is living proof on indomitable will and truth. Now let's move to other regions. On May 20th of this year, the official Gazette of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria published a law on the criminalization of French colonialism. This completed the process of preparing and adoption this document, initiated in 2025. The law entails the recognition of French colonialism of Algeria from 1830 to 1962 as a state crime with no statute of limitations. Specifically, it lists specific offenses falling under this category, including international killings, the use of military force against civilians, the use of prohibited types of weapons, and others. France is required to eliminate the consequences of nuclear and chemical tests on Algerian territory, provide detailed information about them, and pay compensation to the victims. Criminal liability is provided for the denial, propaganda, and glorification of French colonial acts in Algeria. We support the decisive action of Algeria, which has experienced the full weight of French oppression, aimed at providing a fair and comprehensive assessment of the period of Western colonial expansion. Algeria's principled and consistent position on this crucial issue is also confirmed by the active participation of the representative in the work of the Forum of Supporters of Combating Modern Practices of Neocolonialism for the Freedom of Nessus. Chagos, we continue to monitor the situation there. We continue to closely monitor the situation there. Back in 2019, the International Court of Justice recognized London's continued control over the archipelago as illegal. By the way, Russia supported the claim, but the British reluctantly began to meet Mauritius halfway on this issue. Even this step was made with great reservation, and only when the other political parties came to power on the Albion. But then situation changed. It suddenly turned out that White House was not satisfied with such self-activity on London's part, and for the inhabitants of Downing Street, dependent on the opinion of their older brother across the ocean, this turned out to be more important than caring for the reputation of or fulfilling already assumed obligations. Let's not be ignorant and naive. Many English ruling circles were glad of such a rebuke from Washington. As a result, in London they again began to stall the process. The ratification process in the parliament slowed down, and then the legislative session came to an end. As you remember, we spoke about this recently on April 13 of this year. Deputy head of the Foreign Office, Stephen Doughty, effectively confirmed to the House of Commons leaks in the media about the indefinite suspension of the ratification. These tactics, by the way, is often used by the British to talk out domestic political problems. They create commissions, committees, some kind of independent investigation are so-called launched that go on for many years, allowing them to let off steam, but rarely lead to improvements. And it has nothing to do with the law. We hope that in this case they will not be able to sweep the matter under the rug. After all, not only international law but also the sympathies of the world community are on the side of Mauritius. but the moral of the story is obvious. Yesterday they promised, today they forget about these promises. And even the Prime Minister of the British, with all the educational background, it doesn't mean anything, and the British elite will always be guided by signals from across the ocean, not by consideration of justice and solidarity with those who once suffered from English colonialism. There's good news. I would like to draw your attention to a significant military memorial event organized by a Russian embassy in the United States, designed to remind us of a combat brotherhood between USSR and its allies in the defeat of Nazis. On May 15 of this year, the U.S. Navy Museum in the heart of the Washington, our diplomats presented to the American co-chair of the Bilateral Commission on the prisoners to the retired Central Robert Ferguson capsules with water and soil from the sinking site of American submarine USS Wahoo. In October 1943, it sank near Sakhalin due to the Japanese airstrike. Among the guests at the event was the nephew of Chief Petty Officer Robert Lowy and others. And we know that ceremony was preceded on the painstaking work of the Russian Geographical Society. In May 2024, the representative of this engineering company conducted an expedition to the submarine sinking site. At the depth of 60 meters, they identified and they engraved ships, like people, also need glory, respect, and immortality, eternal memory to them. So this engraved plate is located at the depth of 60 meters. This gesture is just a reminder that military honor and memory of those fallen have no nationality and borders, and should not be the piece of time. Furthermore, at that time, a wreath with a ribbon reading "The Russian Remember" was lowered to the hull of the vessel. So now they are in the National Museum of Washington. It's gratifying that not only in Russia but also in the United States we still remember our alliance in the fight against a common enemy, and the enormous, terrible price the Soviet people paid for liberating the world against the brown plague. We welcome the desire of the American side to help us spread the truth about the events of those years, countering the attempts of revanchists. And another announcement, tomorrow we are celebrating the day of EAEUA, starting from the 1st January of this year.
The market of this union and the international contacts are growing and strengthening. Cooperation is growing in transport, logistics, agriculture, and energy security, product security. The EU has become a major player internationally. International contacts are very strong. Trade with Vietnam, Serbia, Iran. Agreements that allow to resolve a wide range of issues in cooperation between countries without the creation of a free trade zone. With China, more than 80 memorandums of cooperation, of the body of Eurasian Commission. There are also talks with Iran and India, with Tunisia, interaction with observer states, Pakistan, Cuba, Iran. And for the Russian Federation, the participation in the EAEU is an important factor in economic development, trade, and decreasing the bureaucratic burden on businesses and the growth in trade activities. For common citizens, it's a wider choice in goods in shops, and for businesses it's more supply chains and strengthening their presence in international markets. And we thank our partners for fruitful cooperation, and we hope to further develop our economic potential and strengthen the businesses of our countries. And now I am ready to answer your questions. Is International Life with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. You have mentioned about demolishing monuments in Ukraine. Unfortunately, there is one more such signal in another region in the CIS space. In Armenia, they have not abandoned plans to dismantle the memorial to those killed in the Great Patriotic War in the village of Artik in the Shirak region. How would you comment on this situation? You know, as far as we understand, the authorities of the village of Artik and the higher authorities aspire to complete their plans for the memorial to the compatriots who have died in the Great Patriotic War, and they plan to build a fountain in that place. But the logical question is whether there is no other place for a fountain, whether this monument it will be dismantled or removed to some other location, as our colleagues have mentioned in Armenia earlier. Unfortunately, such cases remain without the attention of the Armenian government, and people are against such a decision. If it's about dismantling a monument without its moving, it's just indecent, and the reaction of the Armenian authorities, taking into account it's an event of our common history. It's not just a concern, it's cries for help of those who see how the history is rewritten. They observe those specific examples. There is also a more dangerous trend that can be characterized by as global rewriting of the historical memory. It was demonstrated last year when there were whitewashing statements, whitewashing the Nazis on the Armenian state television. Then Foreign Minister Arat Mirzayan urged to ignore individual words and promised to look into the matter. However, no reaction followed, and as we have understood, no one reacted and no one studied those cases. Now the neo-Nazism reached Yerevan from Zelensky, who issued threats from the Armenian capital to attack the Red Square during the Victory Day parade. Now Yerevan is removing the phrase the Great Patriotic War from draft CIS documents. It's just this policy of removal, of erasing of the phrase the Great Patriotic War from modern documents that's taken into account of the heroism demonstrated by the Armenians, the people of Armenia, the ancestors of the modern Armenians in the years of the Second World War. So that's the European narratives. Those pro-European aspiration, are those the manifestation? Is that their understanding? It's about the Armenian society not even understanding what is happening in that track. Because people, they are ready to protect their historical memory. They are ready to fight for the glorious pages of their history, because it's a part of their self-conscious, part of the people, part of the state. But those people who forget their history, they have no future actually. Thank you very much. One more question. How would you comment on the accusations by the Lithuanian authorities that allegedly from the Kaliningrad region GPS signals are spoofed in the Baltic region countries? You know, let them just provide at least some proof of that. And then we will be able to discuss something, to be talking about something, not just words. And their words should not be believed. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on. Now it's ridiculous, but I keep receiving online questions. You know, Dmitry Sergeyevich is another organization. Is RIA Novosti with us? Yes, we're here. Kristina Rodriguez, RIA Novosti. Yes, it's an interesting development. You know, something happens, but I'm addressed to Maria Viktorovna and so on. So, Kristina Rodriguez, RIA Novosti, if you allow me 2 questions today. Yes, that's convenient. Our first question. There is information that the US and Japan will hold joint military drills from the 22nd of June to the 1st of July, and that the Japanese Kanoe Air Base, they plan to deploy this strike Typhoon complex, missile complex, able to launch small and medium-range missiles. I would like to know how the Russian Foreign Ministry assesses such actions by the US and Japan. You know, we have commented on such small and medium-range missile complexes on multiple occasions. It's of negative impact on stability and security of the region, the Asia-Pacific region, and a direct threat to our Far Eastern regions. We have on multiple occasions warned the Japanese side on such actions, like deliberate hostile actions towards the Russian Federation and ignoring its national interests. And Russia, as it has been published in the statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the 4th of August 2021, is no longer bounded by the moratorium to deploy small and medium-range land missiles, and there will be compensational military technical measures, response measures. Thank you very much, and I will move on to my second question during your briefing on the 7th of May. You mentioned the French media position in Africa, and audiovisual sector, as we have learned from public sources, there was serious criticism of the overall state of affairs in the country's media. How would you comment on this? You know, it's actually about a detailed report on the neutrality, functioning and financing of public broadcasting presented to the French National Assembly by Parliament member Charles Eloncle. So this report, it states that the appointments to state-owned media outlets in France are done taking into account their political stance and affiliation to parties. There are specific examples in this report. As you have mentioned, it's convenient One of the France Television directors, Stéphane Sidbon-Gomes, previously coordinated the Green Party's election campaigns. Today he manages 3,000 employees, direct quote, without even holding a press card. Radio France executive director Sibylle Veil is a classmate of Emmanuel Macron, and her husband was one of the ideologists of his presidential campaign, so they combine work with positions in city administrations, for example, so it's convenient, I think. The head of ARCOM, the state broadcasting oversight body, Martin Adjari, previously worked in the offices of 4 socialist ministers. That's the focus of the main MP's criticism. It's underrepresentation on the platforms of the leading television and radio channels. There are cases of some political parties not being present in the media, and their airtime being deliberately curtailed, and that's without any reaction from ARCOM. That practice was detrimental to the main political opponents of Macron, like France insubordinate and national rally parties. So those political forces, they planned to create it's a direct quote, sanitary cordon around those opposition political forces. So in the French government just did not allow them to participate in the media events, not letting them in. It's a breach of the freedom of speech and destruction of pluralism in France, in its media space. In his comments on France Television's editorial policy, Stéphane Sidbon-Gomes had to admit that it's a direct quote, sharp edges were significantly smoothed out. I would say they were just turned into some angles and it was just central media, central for information transfer. And we cannot be talking here about the impartiality of the French media. And the oversight body ARCOM being notorious for its Russophobic policy and bans on Russian media, so this report is very interesting. I would repeat, not from the point of view of its assessments, but specific facts are important, quotations, testimonies collected by professional figures. And this report has been already attacked by the French government, criticized, and it's a good testimony of the interference, direct interference of French authorities into the work of national channels for the purposes of manipulation to suit their own political interests. We have heard just beastly, not just criticism, but aggressive rhetoric and wordings with regard to our country, our journalists and media outlets. They have not noticed the killings of Russian public figures, media figures. They have ignored Russian media channels being taken away from the Western media space, taken away from the broadcasting, but it tried to, in many ways, marginalize the Russian journalism. So I think this report has drawn some line for the accusations. So they should just accuse themselves. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Vestia with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. The first question is about the relations between Russia and Armenia. Previously, Armenian Foreign Minister Evrat Mirzayan has said that Yerevan is not interested in severing relations with Moscow. So how will it be possible to preserve allied relations with Russia, and what are the mid-term perspectives for the relations with Armenia? You know, your question is one of many questions on this account. And on the sidelines of the Security Council, the security conference, we have mentioned this issue, and there were multiple contexts in the relevant formats, and I have prepared significant material in order to comprehensively cover our bilateral relations. And I would like to start not only with bilateral relations, but the relations of Russia towards Armenia and its citizens. It has not changed. We consider the Republic our natural partner, and the Armenian people, we consider them brotherly people. It was back in the Soviet times and the catastrophic earthquake of 1988 and the first years of independence, when our countries lived through serious major social economic crises. The modern history has many such examples, like the participation of Russia in the elimination of consequences of different natural disasters in the north of Armenia in May 2024. And there were statements by the Armenian authorities that they will not allow to use the Republic against our country, but we just judge by deeds, not only by words. And the deeds are somehow contrary to the words in many cases. Because Russia has never been against the diversification of the foreign relations of Armenia, but it can hardly be considered balanced in the today's situation. Because for some reasons, Yerevan prolongs the serious initiatives with our participation and promotes some Euro standards, but no one is aware what those Euro standards what it means, and signs some framework plans with the Western capitals. But there are important details in that, because those Western capitals have declared a true hybrid war on Russia and aim at imposing a strategic defeat on Russia. And with those countries, Yerevan just concludes those strategical agreements on plans and intentions. Those who wish ill to our common Eurasian space. And they actually start interaction with Western Europe, European Union countries, where traditionally and solidly bonuses to Armenia. It has been Moscow bringing those benefits, and the detriment of relations with Moscow. There is no detriment, there are bonuses, there are benefits, but for some reason we're starting to being substituted in those tracks. But the success of those new beginning in relations is not guaranteed, because in many cases Westerners, they deceive, and you should study on those examples.
We see a whole parade of declaration and strategic partnership concluded with EU members. Moreover, these countries that aim to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, and with those who are at the forefront of European Russophobia, for example, such leaders of the European construction as Lithuania. I beg your pardon, probably it's quite interesting, but you need to look at the indices of the economic or industrial growth demonstrated by Lithuania, or probably energy sector is developing quite fast. I am not sure in what direction. The reassuring statements of the Armenian authorities about Russian-Armenian relations contrast sharply with what we see and hear during the heated election campaign. We know the demonstrative connivance of the team of Nikol Pashinyan regarding the targeted campaign of the West to stimulate anti-Russian sentiment. Literally every day claims and planted stories that Moscow is allegedly interfering in the internal affairs of the Republic, subjecting it to the hybrid attacks. Spy mania, espionage is being cranked up, and tales about FSB or KGB are being circulated. Against this background, it's evident that it's evident to the naked eye that relations with Moscow are perceived as a tactical tool, not financial support for reorientation towards the European path. Like they say, civilizational choice, according to the representative of Armenian leadership, has already been made. It is, they say, enshrined in the law on the start of the process of Armenian accession to the European Union in 2025. They just claim that please don't pay attention to that, it's just on paper. Of course, we cannot be concerned about the cause of Armenian leadership towards rapprochement of the Euro-Atlantic community, whose mainstream political line is sharpened against Moscow. The EU itself is transforming from an economic union into an aggressive militaristic bloc. Its actual merger with NATO is being observed. The Anglo-Saxons openly boast about how they are tearing Armenia from the clutches of the authoritarian Russia and connecting it to the military political mechanism. A mark of this was Zelensky's visit to Yerevan, and this is no longer about economics at all. It's obvious that such line of Armenian authorities, and he just threatened to strike Russia. So it blows the mutually beneficial strategic partnership between our countries and creates risk of Yerevan losing all the advantages it receives from it. At the end of 2025, Russia's share in Armenian foreign trade amounted to about 36%, up to 98% of exports of Armenian agricultural products and almost 80% of export of strong alcoholic beverages go to the Russian market. Money transfers from Russia to Armenia last year reached 3.9 billion USD, about 13% of the Republic GDP. Companies with Russian capital provide tens of thousands of jobs and consistently rank among the largest taxpayers in Armenia. As is known, Armenian citizens enjoy certain benefits in terms of temporary residence and work in our country. Russia is a guarantor of Armenia's energy and food security. The Republic receives Russian gas at preferential prices 177.5 per thousand cubic meters, while the price on the international market is about 600. Just imagine, three times less as compared to the international prices. Our country almost completely covers the Republic's needs for gas, fuel, and vital products like grain. Moreover, they are also supplied at prices below market rates. it's important that they sometimes impose the restrictions on the export of certain categories of goods from our country do not usually apply to Armenia. Of course, Armenian citizens themselves will choose for the path for further development of their country. I would like just to emphasize that Russia is interested in truly sovereign and independent Armenia, which we have always perceived as an equal partner and friend. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I would like to ask the second question. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that trilateral negotiations between Russia, the U.S., and Ukraine are not currently being conducted. What is needed to resume these negotiations, and how do you assess the mediation role of the U.S. in this process? We consistently welcome the efforts of the U.S. President Trump and others who are interested sincerely to find the ways to facilitate a diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian conflict, noting that among Western leaders, he is currently the only one who understands its root causes. They lie in systematic creation of the collective West of threats to the national security of Russian Federation. We see no fundamentally new points in the statement of Marco Rubio. We see the key to a productive negotiation process in the political will to seek mutually acceptable solutions aimed at a long-term and sustainable settlement of the conflict. I mean, in the context of the settlement of these conflicts, both we and the U.S. side have such a will, which cannot be set by representatives of Ukraine and their Western handlers, who have recently resorted to ultimatum rhetorics, while the Kiev regime itself uses terrorist methods and strikes civilian targets with larger supplies of weapons and money. The main point of application of efforts in our country has been and remains the achievement of the goals and objectives of the special military operation. This can be achieved not only through the political diplomatic means, like we regard always as a priority, but also through military means, which does exist, and no one disregarded these options, but the priority, I stress this, would remain the political diplomatic means. Thank you very much. Thank you. Xinhua, are you with us? Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna. We have a question. China has extended the visa-free regime for Russian citizens until the end of 2027, in connection with which interpersonal exchanges between our countries may experience an unprecedented rise. What is your opinion? What new requirements does such liberalization of travel place on a new generation of versatile specialists who are equally proficient in the language and deeply understand the realities of the other country? What proposals do you have for strengthening the joint training of such personnel and for the high-quality implementation of the year of Russian-Chinese education? I believe you correctly mentioned that it opens vast opportunities to expand cultural and educational and interpersonal contacts between the citizens of Russia. The celebration during the last 2 years, the years of culture, also boosted these events. The same is true for education, and it focuses on the younger generations. One of these tasks is to create and provide new possibilities to staff training and preparation of young specialists in various projects and deepening the knowledge about the partner countries. I would like to draw your attention that we have huge attention in our country on the part of the educational institutions and academia circles. We believe that the greater number of young people can join these initiatives, start and realize their talents for the benefits of Russian-Chinese relations and cooperation and strategic interaction between our countries. And we do hope that our respective mass media would cover broadly these events which are planned and conducted within these years of culture, so that to attain the great number of participants and open vast possibilities for education and culture. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Anna Dalu, are you with us? Yes, Maria Vladimirovna, we are with you, and we have only one question for today. What would be the Russian reaction to the U.S. decision to send an additional contingent to Poland, and how could this affect security in Eastern Europe? Of course, we are closely monitoring both the statements of the U.S. leadership regarding the reconfiguration of the American military presence in Europe and practical steps of Washington in this direction. We believe that withdrawal of U.S. armed forces based in European countries for many decades under the pretext of the Soviet and then the equally fabricated Russian threat would be an irrational, justified and long overdue step towards the partial stabilization of the extremely tense and unbalanced military political situation in Western Eurasia, for which NATO is to blame. However, in the Washington interpretation, as far as we can judge, the declared reconfiguration plans are directly linked to the factor of reliability, or more precisely to the degree of readiness of certain European countries of the USA to follow the path of imposed on them of maximally loading their own accounts to finance the American military-industrial complex through orders in the interest of militarizing their countries. If this is the case, then we have no reason to be satisfied with their development, which would obviously lead to a deepening of multi-dimensional confrontation with our country by the bloc of Western states, which have recently been intensely preparing their societies for the armed conflict that would be suicidal for them. The prospect of redeployment U.S. military-based and contingents from less reliable to, in the U.S. interpretation, more reliable countries of Central and Eastern Europe, including Poland, literally within striking distance along our country's western borders, is even more unacceptable. This would not only inevitably necessitate the forced adoption of military technical measures necessary to ensure the security of Russia, but would also lead to qualitative escalation of military tension throughout the European space, especially against the backdrop of the increasingly provocative line of the European satellites in the US regarding our country. Let's move on. Sputnik, are you with us? Yes. We are here. Our today's question, unfortunately, is getting more and more relevant, especially in the light of Ukrainian strikes. The Palantir moderated AI-based Palantir has been openly moderating the course of tactics of military operation for the Ukraine for several years. Does Russia have any information about the possible involvement of Palantir system in the territorial attacks on the dormitory in Starobilsk? Can you repeat the last portion of your question? Does Russia have any information about the possible engagement or involvement of Palantir systems? Yes, now I see. Yes. Since the beginning of the special military operation, Palantir has been closely working with the Kiev regime, providing the capabilities of using artificial intelligence systems in the interest of Ukraine. It's well known that the company has agreements and obligations to the Pentagon as a contractor. The leadership of Palantir adheres to obvious overtly fascist views reflected in the company April manifesto, which justified the use of AI-based technologies for a kind of time of Western superiority. In essence, it divides the world into us and the wonderful jungles, as they say. We specifically discussed the activities of this company at one of the forums. I can add a link to that. And we have no doubts that Palantir is involved in formation and implementation of Nazi Russophobic policy of Zelensky regime and Bandera regime. I think if this assumption does not correspond to reality, the company's management will be able to provide convincing evidence to the contrary, and we will take them into account. Thank you. Let's move on. RT Balkan. Are you... RT Balkan, our question is as following. In an interview with Politica, the Speaker of the Serbian Parliament, Brnabic, stated, I would say that Belgrade's relation with Moscow are brotherly relations. And she also said that Serbia does not have large trade turnover with Russia, and that, for example, its trade turnover with Bosnia and Herzegovina is larger. How would you comment on that? Thank you. Thank you for your question. There is no need to repeat this quotation. Can I use your kindness and indulgence in terms of coverage? And I would like to ask you to provide the following questions to Anna Brabic. Does Serbia have other brotherly relations with other countries? If yes, please provide examples so that for us it would be possible to compare this. If it is all, thank you. We didn't invite the China Media Group. Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna, China Media Group. We have two questions. First is, according to US President Donald Trump, enriched uranium from Iran should be transferred to US for subsequent destruction or destroyed on the spot under international control. What is the Russian position regarding this statement, and what motives, in your estimation, may underline this proposal? We again would like to draw your attention to the fact that the mentioned stocks of highly enriched uranium belongs to the Islamic Republic of Iran. In this regard, the fate of the mentioned material can only be determined by Tehran. Only the Iranians have the right to dispose of it, including deciding whether to export it outside the territory. If yes, then where and how. At the same time, the issue is one of the central topics of the ongoing indirect US-Iranian dialogue. We call on the parties not to slide back into armed confrontation, which is potentially fraught with the risk of full-scale humanitarian crisis in the region. Our position on this matter is well known to all and has not changed. At the same time, we have never imposed and do not intend to impose our initiative to transfer Uranian highly enriched uranium to the territory of Russian Federation. The decision on whether to seek our assistance or not remains with Iran. Thank you very much. Another question. On May 26, a meeting of the foreign ministers of Quadrilateral Security Dialogue participants comprising Australia, India, and the US and Japan was held in New Delhi, where they agreed to launch large-scale programs to strengthen energy security, join maritime surveillance, and protect mineral supplies into the Indo-Pacific region. China believes that this cooperation between the states should promote peace, stability, and prosperity. How does Russia view this? Does it contribute to the development of security cooperation in the region, or does it, on the contrary, carry a risk of geopolitical confrontation?
Just 1 second, please. Whatever has been declared publicly by the participants since the creation of Quad, this four-country format dialogue on security, the main impetus is put on the military component. Regular joint drills of these 4 countries have caused the development of projects with the use of force in this region. And it's obvious, taking into account the ministerial Quad meeting mentioned by you and their own control over the Indian and Pacific Oceans and expanding access to critical infrastructure in regional states. On the other hand, the security declared by this community, it's not security for everyone. The Quad activities do not demonstrate any actions that could be characterized as care for common security or the global benefit. However, they try to convince everyone of that. It's actually attempts to ensure the security for the benefit, for the detriment of other states. It's successful, positive experience, the decades-long experience of the architecture of multilateral institutions represented by ASEAN, where security issues are discussed among other things. It's about the issues of regional agenda and all the Quad countries being part of the East Asia Summit. Russia, Austria, India, China, South Korea, the US and Japan. This format has a lot of opportunities to address the challenges in maritime cooperation, food security, financial and economic stability throughout the Asia-Pacific region. But a special member of this 4-country association is they just need some joint initiatives. Narrow initiatives, elite clubs, closed models, having no experience, positive experience in this region. Our country is convinced that it's not the bloc schemes. Narrow cooperations are needed for success in this region, but equal environment with equal opportunities for all states. If that's it, we'll move on. Thank you. Thank you. Is Reuters with us? Madam Zakharova, hello, we are here. And we have a question on Baltic and West Europe states. At the end of last week, they made a joint statements on drones in their airspace, accusing Russia of disinformation campaign and declaring they had never allowed their territory or airspace being used for drone attacks on targets in Russia. However, drones in spring repeatedly attacked the ports of Ust-Luga and Primorsk in the Leningrad region. So we would like to ask, does Russia have any evidence that the airspace of Baltic and Nordic countries has been used for strikes on Russian territory? And is NATO involved in these strikes? We see statements from NATO and its member countries that they do not allow their airspace being used for strikes on Russia. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte calls those accusations absurd. However, such drones from the Baltic and Western European countries against targets in Russia, they not only continue, but their intensity is increasing. NATO countries are forced to respond themselves, shooting down drones trying to do that and raising raid alerts. We will take that into account as mentioned by our military agencies representatives. In some NATO countries' representatives, their authorities just accusing our country. Those accusations are highly absurd. We should not forget who actually supplies those drones to the Kiev regime. And it's not us who should be asked on that, but the Rammstein format, when they are telling about new drone supplies and joint manufacturing. They do discuss how they will fly, what targets they will attack, and then let them share with you. They can share those plans and that information, and let them comment on the results. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Thank you. Is Lenta.ru with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have two questions today, if you allow us. The first one about Alexander Stubb, recently mentioning his readiness to represent the EU during negotiations in Russia. And our question is about Russian-Finnish relations and contacts. Which level are they in, and which issues do you discuss within the scope of the foreign ministry? No, we have not been contacted. There have been no addresses by the Finnish side, and our bilateral contacts are just now limited to foreign missions, visa issues, and the protection of Russian real estate in Finland, ensuring legal rights and interests of our compatriots living there, cooperation war memorial sphere, in accordance with the 1992 agreement between the governments, and security of our foreign missions, and some other issues. So his statements, Russophobic statements, Stubb is doing his best for his candidature not to be considered. Thank you very much. And the second question. On the 26th of May, Russia was visited by the delegation from the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. What were the results of this visit? How could that change Russian-Japanese relations, and what are the issues in which we are ready to cooperate? Actually, Moscow has never put any obstacles to contacts by business circles. The most important thing is for this interaction to be mutually beneficial. Our position has not been changed significantly, and the official Tokyo also has expressed its stance that has not been significantly changed. It's important to understand that the Russian-Japanese relations are now at an unprecedentedly low level because of the unfriendly policy by Japan, by its authorities, that is linked to the situation in Ukraine without the understanding of any root causes of this conflict. Any cooperation is possible only after the Japanese authorities abandoning anti-Russian policy. Thank you very much. Is Bolt News with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. During the International Security Forum, you have contacted on the tragedy in Starobelsk, and Russia has been accused of allegedly lying. And how does Russia intend to break that international blockade, and what diplomatic legal steps does the Foreign Ministry take in order for the UN to admit the deaths of children caused by the Ukrainian drone? Actually, this question does not require a full format response, because otherwise it will take around 3 or 4 hours. And let me mention the specific actions. The actions in response to the allegations mentioned by you, by the Westerners, during the Security Council meeting, such that inhumane rhetoric. Press tour, it's difficult to call that, but a trip of foreign correspondents to Starobelsk, where they saw with their own eyes that the EU, NATO representatives at the UN are just lying. Because they said it's allegedly a social site, not a school, not a college, but nearly military structure, and so on. More than 50 people from all the continents, many countries, and journalists from all over the world have witnessed that, have covered that. Of course, the mainstream, it's working in order to serve the regimes. But it can be broken. It can. Because yesterday, the permanent representative of Russia at the UN, Vasily Nebenza, held a press conference at the UN headquarters, demonstrated the footage of the victims, the witnesses. Our OSCE representatives are also working and providing interviews, publishing materials. You can check that yourself. All our foreign missions, without exceptions, will make the tragedy in Starobelsk central to their foreign policy work. I can promise you that. Because it's not only us who need it, it's the entire world that needs that. Because there is a point of no return. If we believe liars from Latvia, Lithuania, and so on, who tell in the Security Council there has been no killing of children, the world just will fall into this post-truth world and just be confused in those concepts of good and bad, truth and lie, and we will do our best in order for that not to happen. Thank you very much. And I will additionally send you the materials on the stance of the Secretariat, because it should not be playing its own game and serve the Westerners, but it should play according to the rules formed in the UN Charter and the mandate of the Secretariat itself and its bureaucrats, officials, and not to invent its own interpretations of the reality, but to be based on the facts. And we have additionally sent you this material. Thank you. Thank you. Is news.ru with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova at news.ru. We have 2 questions today. The detention of Metropolitan Hilarion in the Czech Republic on suspicion of drug trafficking. Why do you think such provocation was needed, and what other steps can the Russian Foreign Ministry take in this situation? So I would like to draw your attention to a detailed coverage of this situation by Metropolitan Hilarion himself. He made a special video address thanking, and we also thank him for his efforts, for noting the efforts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its foreign missions. But what is more important is a detailed coverage of the situation, how that all happened. In this video, he is talking about possible circumstances and aims, who can be behind that. Of course, there is immense work of lawyers, of legal professionals ahead, and Metropolitan Hilarion has been supported from our country and a lot of support from other countries, and it has been quite a high-profile case. And I hope that legal specialists will also pay attention to this situation. And actually, the initiators of this provocation, they should reply, and the law enforcement authorities who have initiated this, they should reply. And it was not only the denigration of the Metropolitan himself, but for the negative atmosphere around orthodoxy in the Czech Republic and Europe as a whole. I would remind you, on the 26th of May, the Metropolitan was released from a temporary detention facility without charges. From the very beginning, the Russian embassy in the Czech Republic provided him with the assistance and what was required, and we will continue to support our citizens who find themselves in difficult situations, but the question remains open. The authors of this provocation being held accountable, and those who have detained the car and inspected him without the presence of a person who was present there, then charges were put against him. I think it's unacceptable. And it's in the interests of the Czech Republic itself and its citizens to establish the truth and to avoid the repetition of such incidents, because it's a detriment to the reputation of Prague, because a car was stopped, transported 8 kilometers without putting any charges and explaining the details of those charges. And then those who were in the car, they were required to go to the distance from which they could not follow the search. It was not fixed anyhow, and then there was some alleged proof and so on. And we would ask Prague to take all the necessary steps. Thank you very much. Our second question.
Head of European Diplomacy Kaja Kallas announced on May 24 that EU foreign ministers would discuss how to increase international pressure on Russia this week. How does the foreign ministry assess the statement and Europe's attempts to increase pressure on Russia? I just would like to start by reminding you a brief joke about mice eating cactus, crying, weeping, but trying to end up with this. This is the same story about the endless packages, sanctioned packages, just trying to find additional forces in order to implement the maniac idea to inflict strategic defeat on Russia. In terms of comments, seriously, we shouldn't pay any attention to that. This is a mania-phobia, one stimulating each other. The main idea is, in fact, that while losing themselves in this mania and phobia, they are inflicting this strategic defeat on themselves, like the indices, economic indices of the European Union and the number of companies and businesses going abroad and plausible situation of the European business and other indicators should send signal to them that something is wrong. But when you are quite deep in mania and phobia, then they are not thinking about this. Thank you very much. News Front, are you with us? Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna. One question, if you don't mind. Yes, of course. Have contacts been resumed between representatives of Bulgaria and Russia, and what is needed to resume and maintain relations in this difficult geopolitical situation? After on May 8th of this year, a new government was formed in Bulgaria, headed by former President Rumen Radev. No signals to this date have been received indicating a desire by officials Sofia to return our bilateral dialogue to a normal course. At the same time, we continue close contact with the representative of patriotic, nationally oriented forces in Bulgaria. Regarding the preservation of relations in the current geopolitical situation, we can only state with regret that over the past years, as a result of the actions of the Bulgarian administration, catastrophic damage has been done to the long-established ties between our countries and peoples. To resume normal competition, it applies to most EU member states. It's necessary to critically rethink approaches to communication with Russia to demonstrate the ability to act soberly based on national rather than narrow corporate interests. Thank you very much. Sada Erus, are you with us? Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna. Thank you very much. I would like to ask two questions, actually. How does the Russian Foreign Ministry assess the recent statements by Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski regarding his refusal to engage in dialogue with Vladimir Putin? Who specifically asked him to engage in this dialogue? And how does Moscow view Czech President Petr Pavel's proposal to consider cutting Russia off the global internet network and financial system? Do such statements indicate that individual NATO countries are deliberately opposing a diplomatic settlement to the conflict over Ukraine? Regarding Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski at the European Security Forum, it has long been a national sport in Poland regarding in Russophobia. But the question arises, is Mr. Sikorski really the Minister of Foreign Affairs? Judging by his manner and rhetoric, he is more likely a minister of propaganda, not Poland, but the other country. because his propaganda is anti-Polish propaganda. We also notice nothing new in the statements by Czech President Petr Pavel. This is a repetition of his well-worn mantra about the need to use, like he says, the language of force against Russia. It's very interesting. I just wonder what he is going to do with this strong tongue. I'm just scared to imagine. Now they are thinking about some kind of asymmetrical and non-lethal measures. So the last physical and other resources are used not to overcome their own problems, but just to deepen, another attempt to deepen or to worsen the situation in Europe with all the bad consequences for them. The second question, we talked a lot about Starobilsk. I've been there in the group of those journalists, and I see everything with all my own eyes. Following the Russian organized trip of foreign journalists there, has the international response to the tragedy in Lugansk changed? And what conclusions have been drawn from the visits of the foreign media representative? The changes, yes, we see the growing number of materials and publications appearing in the mass media, but the Western narrative remains the same, that nothing has happened. But the silence in which the strategy was packed in, this silence has indeed been broken due to the efforts of those journalists visiting the site, foreign journalists who wrote or shown what they've seen there. They did no propaganda materials, or they didn't get paid for that. They just came and described what they've seen. And by doing this, they broke the lies we heard in the United Nations. Rudolf, are you with us? If not, TV Plus, are you with us? Maria Vladimirovna, hello. Tbilisi, Skopje. I represent TV Plus. Please accept sincere condolences on the tragedy in Starobilsk, organized by Anglo-Saxons. Now my question is, we have information that the Armenian side allegedly refused to accredit the Russian mass media during the election to the National Assembly. If it is so, in fact, what was the motivation by Yerevan to make this step, and what is your assessment of that? I can confirm that during these elections to the National Assembly, there is a pool or observers on the part of the CIS member states, and taking all this into account, we took positively and started working to prepare this team. The list of Russian observers was sent in accordance procedure for the accreditation, which was required by Armenian side, but Armenian partners informally informed us about and that they cannot accept some citizens of Russia, like 3 members of the State Duma from Karachay-Cherkessk Republic. We requested the explanations, the reasons why. So far, no formal reply hasn't been received. Why these identified persons are not accepted by Armenian side, we do not have any information. Probably we don't have any information about them being in some blacklists or stop lists or whatever. No such information. They're wonderful experts in these things. They respect sincerely Armenia. They have never they would never thought about this. So far, I don't have any tangible replies. Probably Armenian side should have been responsible for that. I just learned about this yesterday, and I cannot imagine what these mentioned Russian citizens did, that they are not allowed in Armenia. Probably I can imagine that they are on sanction list of the European Union, and this is a part of vulnerability, or I don't know. Probably we need to come back to the European standards or narratives imposed in the territory of Armenia. They do exist when Russian observers are not allowed to observe elections. Probably that is the reason for fast rapprochement of Armenia and the European Union. What about democracy, so-called democracy mentioned by Pashinyan? If it's so or not, we are puzzled why illegal sanctions can be the reason of refusal. But if there are other reasons, then please identify them in terms of explain why these people are not allowed in Armenia. If it's so, then Armenian side in its actions with respect to Russia, Armenia once again opt for anti-Russian cause supported by Brussels, European Union. What about the votes of friendship or pledges in pledges? That would run in contrast to the votes of leadership of Armenia that interaction with the European Union is not detrimental to relations with Russia, and is not in the spirit of bilateral contacts at the highest political level and pledges towards Russia. Of course, we are deeply concerned about this. We regret about this and misunderstand this, but we are not ready to accept these logics, and we need to take this into account in our contacts with Yerevan. Probably if the people plan to react somehow, I think that would be the right thing, then probably one cannot imagine why they are the targets of these unfriendly actions. Thank you very much. If it is so, Russian Vector, are you with us? Maria Vladimirovna, Tatiana Plotnikova. The official statement of the Russian Foreign Minister regarding the strategy of in Starobelsk stated that targeting and reconnaissance data for the UAVs were provided by countries of the North Atlantic Alliance. At the same time, the wreckage of the strike found had Starlink navigation system. Is the act of aggression by the United States a red line for the revocation of the Moscow Declaration of Non-Targeting of Strategic Nuclear Weapons at U.S. cities? First of all, it should be noted that the identification of specific targets for destruction of the event of a nuclear conflict is not within the competence of MFA. Secondly, it's important to understand that the policy itself is in terms of the nuclear deterrence dated November 19, 2024 contain the provisions such the nuclear deterrence is ensured by the presence of armed forces of the Russian Federation, of combat-ready forces and assets capable through the use of nuclear weapons of guaranteed inflicting unacceptable damage on a potential adversary in any situation, as well as by the readiness and determination of the Russian Federation to use such weapons. In essence, it means that our country's strategic nuclear forces are continuously in a state of readiness to immediately perform combat missions as intended upon receiving such an order. Consequently, a potential adversary is forced to reckon with the fact that the reliability of Russian nuclear deterrence is ensured at any moment and under any circumstances. Thank you very much. Союзный TV channel, are you with us? Good morning. In Belarus, the telephone communication with President Macron was a failed attempt to restore these relations. Can you assess the results of this communication as the attempt to bring Belarus under the EU umbrella, or the panicking after the use of strikes? Emmanuel is a classic. Internal search. After the presidential election in 2022, Paris refused to recognize the victory of President Lukashenko, put under doubts, and in other words, he just said, "I don't love you." Over the last years, Macron's administration has provided the assistance to a person who claimed that he is a leader of the Belarus opposition, Madam Tikhanovskaya. He is a frequent guest in Paris. She is always welcome, and some confess in love. They claim that they don't like President Lukashenko, but they like her. So this is the way this movie has been dragging on in Paris. These meetings always took place. I mean, the meetings of democratic forces, like they call themselves, demanding sanctions against Belarus and its citizens. And France is participating in increasing pressure on Minsk, and restrictions were extended till 2027. And then suddenly it turned out that they like very much. Emmanuel likes making telephone calls to Minsk, and I believe other people can do it. And it's quite evident that Paris and other capitals are seeking the only one objective is just to try to drive wedge between Moscow and Minsk.
Because when normal relations are developed, mutually respectful relations, there are no such things. There is logic based on domestic legislation, international legislation, multilateral and bilateral agreements, and the practice of diplomacy, traditions, and culture. But when on one side they admit the results of the elections and then they try to play with the attempts to change the regime and supporting some opposition, talking with them and then just looking at the legitimate authorities again. It's just a self-revelation for Paris. And France knows what is determined policy and hope that there are no illusions that our friends have with regards to the diplomacy, telephone diplomacy by Paris. I think we should introduce a notion, telephone diplomacy of Paris, what is a lot of promises and actually doing nothing, good intentions they turn into bad intentions. And I would say that any attempts by ill wishes to cause quarrels between our fraternal countries are doomed to failure. Our countries are open for equal and mutual respectful dialogue with each other and with all the states of the world. They are also close strategic allies, closely coordinate their foreign policy approaches and jointly defend common interests on the global stage. And I know just the price of those promises by the West, by phone. And our joint nuclear exercises were aimed at strengthening the defense capability and countering possible risks amid rising tensions worldwide. As Russian President Vladimir Putin emphasized, our nuclear triad must serve as a reliable guarantor of the Union States' sovereignty and ensure the achievement of strategic deterrence, maintaining nuclear parity and the balance of power at the global level. Thank you, Madam Zakharova. Is GTV News Pakistan with us? Здравствуйте. Я представляю GTV News Pakistan.
And I am a new correspondent in Moscow, and I have visited Russia before. I always like to work here and produce honest and professional reports about Russia in a positive and objective way. I hope for your understanding if I make any mistakes, and this is still a new experience for me. My question is, how does Russia assess Pakistan's mediating role in contacts between Iran and the United States amid the ongoing conflict between Iran and Israel? Thank you.
First of all, I would like to emphasize that it's not about a conflict between Iran and the US or Israel. It's about the unprovokedly having attacked Iran. Iran was attacked by the US and Israel. And we welcome any international efforts aimed at the escalation of tension and settlement of the situation with taking into account the legitimate interests of the countries of the region. And we highly value the mediation efforts by Islamabad, and we have mentioned that on many occasions. If that's it for you, we move on. Is the Voice of the Fatherland with us? Yes, that's the Voice of the Fatherland, Vladimir Golovanov here. My question is, the US is panicking after the Russian Foreign Ministry's warning about strikes on decision-making centers in Kiev. based on the risk of escalation. So if those points of taking decisions are targets from which direct public threats to use weapons of mass destruction against Russia are made, isn't such Western rhetoric of double standards a direct encouragement of terrorism at the state level? I would like to start replying to your question by urging to be based on reliable sources of information and publications on official resources. In a statement following the 25th of May telephone conversation by Russian and US foreign ministers, it was noted that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov immediately conveyed, please excuse me, Rubio noted that he immediately conveyed the information received from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia to US President Donald Trump, adding that the American side has noted the notifications from the Russian Foreign Ministry to the relevant diplomatic missions. To be precise, this statement has been made after the telephone conversation on the 25th of May by two foreign ministers of Russia and the US. And I would like to note that the collective West countries, contrary to the stated readiness to fight terrorism, have implemented not only double standards in this sphere, but some detrimental logics. Politically, materially, and technically sponsoring and supporting the Kiev regime that is using terrorist methods against Russian civilian population and hitting civilian sites in our country, territory. It causes indignation, not just surprise, that it's outrageous that not one representative of those states has publicly condemned the Ukrainian armed forces attack on the night of the 22nd of May against a college in Starobelsk. The attack by the Ukrainian army drones. This deliberate strike against a civilian facility where children study and live, carried out at night, and it was meant to cause the maximum number of casualties. So it's about Zelensky's practice of carrying out terrorist attacks against our country. We will continue our targeted work at multilateral forums aimed at drawing the attention of the international community to the inadmissibility of such a policy of double standards. I would say that it's already beyond double standards. It's some other field. It's the manipulation, those instruments that need to be characterized as illegal, criminal support of the Kiev regime. It's not just manipulation in words. It's true financing and supplies for the Kiev regime, for terrorists, providing them everything that is needed for terrorist attacks. Thank you. Our second question. Yes, could you please speak up? I cannot hear you. Russian Foreign Ministry previously stated that the West would use Ukrainians as cannon fodder to the last Ukrainian. In the context of the recent announcement of plans to lower the mobilization age in Ukraine to 18 years old, does Russia have official data on what price the European sponsors are willing to pay Kiev for the cleansing of the territory and Is it really true that when the last Ukrainian dies, the US and European politicians will begin to count the losses for the destruction of the entire people? So I have such a fictional question, so for you to be more precise, it's not a discussion but some specific issues. It's just something that you suppose. It's something about the future. It's a question to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Yes, we have mentioned that the West is conducting the war up to the last Ukrainian. It has all the characteristics of the genocidal actions against the Ukrainian people. What the West, the collective West, is doing. It's done for the money of their taxpayers, destroying literally everything, businesses and well-being of their own citizens. You can have a look and study all those narratives in an interview. The head of the Belgium headquarters interview, Frederic Vincent, published in a Le Soir newspaper on the 17th of April this year. Yes, at the cost of Ukrainians' lives, the EU is attempting to secure its best positions without taking into account any losses by the Ukrainian side and without taking into account the welfare of their own citizens. Why do they demonstrate such cruelty? Actually, they have traditions. They have demonstrated cruelty in the 20th century on multiple occasions. And now they are just nurturing this ideology in Ukraine. Inhumane cruelty in Ukraine, in the center of Europe. Now they just draw profit from this, like income. Western curators have said 510 conditions and recommendations before Kiev that are needed in order to receive funding. Is restructuring Ukrainian legislation to suit not the Ukrainians but international sponsors of the Zelensky regime, including privileged access for Western countries to the resources and markets of their new colony. The EU's latest 90 billion loan is once again subject to strict conditions, including preferential treatment for EU defense concerns in the development of its military component. So, post-conflict restoration of Ukraine, it's also Western interests. So the more detriment they make now for Ukraine, the more they can earn in its restoration. But where is this border? Where is this line that separates plundering from restoration? It's a big question. Maybe not for the sum will count hundreds of billions of dollars and maybe trillions of dollars. Thank you. Thank you. Is Rosmedia with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have one question. Armenia is trying to combine participation in Western initiatives like the CIS and the EAEU. Is it not the repetition of the way of Ukraine that has stayed in the CIS while simultaneously moving towards NATO? And does Armenia risk becoming a bargaining chip in the West's geopolitical game? Actually, today I have made some statements, several statements regarding Russian-Armenian relations that has been expressed on different levels and will be discussed during the EAEU meeting as to now, the 29th of May, tomorrow. So let us wait for the commentary on this by the heads of state. I would like to underline once again that the Armenian leadership position is not acceptable for the Russian side regarding the integration with the EU, because Russia has provided a lot to Armenia in those 10 years. The high rate of economic development and export market, the Armenian GDP nearly tripled from $10.5 billion in 2015 to $29.2 billion in 2025. GDP per capita has grown more than twofold. Exports and imports to the EAEU countries more than tenfold. Mutual trade grew to $8.2 billion, peaking at $13 billion in 2024. The real wages have increased by 50%. We hope that pragmatism will prevail in Yerevan. It's not about love for other countries, but it's for their own benefit. And we hope that it will prevail over someone else's interests that are dragging the current authorities into a senseless and, most importantly, dangerous pursuit of the so-called European dream. Dangerous for the Armenian authorities. In the abyss where this European dream has led, there are already many skeletons. We move on. Is Vestnik Kavkaza with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. On the 26th of May, there was Independence Day in Georgia, and today Azerbaijan is marking Independence Day and also the Republic of Armenia. So what is the assessment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia of relations between Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia? And what areas of cooperation do you consider of priority with the South Caucasus states? I have mentioned Armenia on many occasions today. With regard to Georgia, we aim at pragmatism and we take into account the experience, the best practices of the past. And that's despite the confrontational policy by the EU of anti-Russian sanctions and, to put it simply, to sacrifice their own interests in favor of the political frenzy by the West. Georgia has opted for a multi-vector policy. The trade turnover reached a record $2.7 billion last year. The tourist flow reached 1.4 million. Georgia remains a key export market and a leading supplier of strategically important products for us, such as energy and grain. There are also humanitarian contacts between our peoples, shared values, long-standing historical and cultural ties. With regard to Azerbaijan, our relations are aimed at security in the South Caucasus. We coordinate work within the CIS and other international forums, and we are ready to facilitate the Republic's rapprochement with the EAEU. Moscow and Baku relations are mutually beneficial and take into account each other's interests. We value the humanitarian and the cultural component based on the traditionally multifaceted ties between our peoples. Abkhazia and South Ossetia also remain Russia's closest allies in the South Caucasus. It's our tight cooperation at modern stage and the ensuring protection of sovereignty of the republics, promoting the development and strengthening their foreign policy positions, expanding humanitarian ties. We will continue to work together to establish common security frameworks, including the Treaty on Deepening Allied Cooperation signed on the 9th of May by the Presidents of Russia and South Ossetia, and other legal instruments concluded by Moscow with Sukhumi and Tskhinval. So Russia will not leave the South Caucasus and does not intend to do that due to various historical and geographical reasons. But regarding the implication of the EU and the US, it's an open question, because unlike them, Moscow is genuinely interested in the prosperity and peace in that region. We are ready to work in order for the South Caucasus to breathe deeply, so with the air of freedom and not some tight air of Western narratives. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Rudolf with us? I would like to ask.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Zakharova, for this opportunity. Yes, I'm here. I have two questions, and the first one is that has there been any discussion with the US side for them to release their sanctions on Russian companies, especially the ones that are working in oil and gas industry, especially so they will be able to be back to the Iraqi and Kurdistan region oil fields, which they left them due to the sanctions?
I would like to repeat that we have repeatedly voiced our criticism regarding the massive of restrictions imposed on our country, on our companies by several administrations for several decades, starting from 2014. But even before, we had some sanctions imposed on our country. Our principal position regarding the legitimate sanctions remains the same. Any unilateral actions made or within some group of countries which are not based on Security Council resolutions are illegitimate, but just to protect their own economic interest, and another tool for unfair competition for the fight of markets and logistics. We respond to sanctions with our countering measures, sometimes mirror measures, asymmetrical one, but we are doing not to harm ourselves. Probably at the same time or in parallel to reinforce our economic self-sufficiency and independence. The problem of removing sanctions are on the shoulders of those countries who initiated these sanctions. And the citizens and companies or operators of these countries should push the leadership of these countries who suffered a lot of losses. I mean, negative consequences. And for our part, as I have always stressed, and I stress it now, we are open for mutually beneficial and respectful cooperation.
You, as Russia, be vetoing any resolution from United Nations Security Council against Iran and its nuclear program?
Вы знаете, ну, мы можем такое комментировать, когда речь идет о конкретном документе.
We can comment something when we are discussing a specific document or a resolution which was put for vote in. Russia approaches its duties as a permanent member of the UN Security Council with full responsibility. Once again, I stress, the veto is not a privilege, but a tool to prevent the Council from adopting a decision that is unjust and compatible with no purposes and principles of the UN Charter, and that does not meet meet the task of maintaining international peace and security. Let me remind you that in the case of the situation around Iran, together with our Chinese partners, we already vetoed a draft resolution on ensuring security of the Strait of Hormuz on April 7. All statements were made. I will add links to this. If this document is adopted, it could undermine the fragile negotiation process of establishing peace in the region. The correctness of our logics was confirmed literally a few hours after the veto was cast, when an agreement on ceasefire between Iran and the United States was reached. Since May 4th of this year, another draft resolution of Hormuz submitted to the United States, to the United Nations, together with Bahrain, has been under consideration by the UN Security Council. A date for this vote has not yet been set. Our position is obvious now that there has been a progress in efforts to bring the position of Tehran and Washington closer regarding the framework of ceasefire and peace agreement should be reached. If we do not have any further questions, then I will tell you goodbye. Then we will meet in St. Petersburg in person or online in the framework of St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Thank you. See you.